Chapter 4. Black Power. When I was a boy, I used to wonder where my mother came from, how she got on this earth. When I asked her where she was from, she would say, "God made me," and change the subject. When I asked her if she was white, she'd say, "No, I'm light-skinned," and change the subject again. Answering questions about her personal history did not jibe with Mommy's view of parenting 12 curious, wild, brown-skinned children. She issued orders, and her rule was law. Since she refused to divulge details about herself or her past, and because my stepfather was largely unavailable to deal with questions about himself or Ma, what I learned of Mommy's past I learned from my siblings. We traded information on Mommy the way people trade baseball cards at trade shows, offering bits and pieces fraught with gossip, nonsense, wisdom, and sometimes just plain foolishness. "What does it matter to you?" my older brother Richie scoffed when I asked him if we had any grandparents. "You're adopted anyway." My siblings and I spent hours playing tricks and teasing one another. It was our way of dealing with realities over which we had no control. I told Richie I didn't believe him. "I don't care if you believe me or not," he sniffed. "Monty's not your real mother. Your real mother's in jail." "You're lying." "You'll see when Mommy takes you back to your real mother next week. Why do you think she's been so nice to you all week?" Suddenly, it occurred to me that Mommy had been nice to me all week, but wasn't she nice to me all the time? I couldn't remember, partly because within my confused 8-year-old reasoning was a growing fear that maybe Richie was right. Mommy, after all, did not really look like me. In fact, she didn't look like Richie or David, or any of her children for that matter. We were all clearly black, of various shades of brown, some light brown, some medium brown, some very light-skinned, and all of us had curly hair. Mommy was, by her own definition, light-skinned, a statement which I initially accepted as fact, but at some point later decided was not true. My best friend Billy Smith's mother was as light as Mommy was and had red hair to boot, but there was no question in my mind that Billy's mother was black and my mother was not. There was something inside me, an ache I had, like a constant itch that got bigger and bigger as I grew, that told me. It was in my blood, you might say, and however the notion got there, it bothered me greatly. Yet Mommy refused to acknowledge her whiteness. Why she did so was not clear, but even my teachers seemed to know she was white and I wasn't. On open school nights, the question most often asked by my school teachers was, "Is James adopted?" which always prompted an outraged response from Mommy. I told Richie, "If you're adopted too." "Nope," Richie replied, "just you, and you're going back to your real mother in jail." "I'll run away first." "You can't do that. Mommy will get in trouble if you do that. You don't want to see Ma get in trouble, do you? It's not her fault that you're adopted, is it?" He had me then. Panic set in. "But I don't want to go to my real mother. I want to stay here with Ma." "You gotta go. I'm sorry, man." This went on until I was in tears. I remember pacing about nervously all day, while Richie, knowing he had ruined my life, cackled himself to sleep. That night, I lay wide awake and dead, waiting for Mommy to get home from work at 2 a.m., whereupon she laid the ruse out as I sat at the kitchen table in my tattered Fruit-of-the-Loom underwear. "You're not adopted," she laughed. "So you're my real mother?" "Of course I am." Big kiss. "Then who's my grandparents?" "Your grandpa Nash died, and so did your grandma Etta." "Who were they?" "They were your father's parents." "Where were they from?" "From down south." "You remember them?" I had a faint recollection of my grandmother Etta, an ancient black woman with a beautiful face who seemed very confused, walking around with a blue dress and a fishing pole, the bait, tackle, and line dragging down around her ankles. She didn't seem real to me. "Did you know them, Ma?" "I knew them very, very well." "Did they love you?" "Why do you ask so many questions?" "I just want to know. Did they love you? Because your own parents didn't love you, did they?" "My own parents loved me." "Then where are they?" A short silence. "My mother died many, many years ago," she said. "My father, he was a fox. No more questions tonight. You want some coffee cake?" "Enough said." If getting Mommy's undivided attention for more than 5 minutes was a great feat in a family of 12 kids, then getting a midnight snack in my house was a greater thrill. I cut the questions and ate the cake, though it never stopped me from wondering, partly because of my own growing sense of self, and partly because of fear for her safety. Because even as a child, I had a clear sense that black and white folks did not get along, which put her and us in a pretty tight space. In 1966, when I was 9, Black power had permeated every element of my neighborhood in St. Albans, Queens. Malcolm X had been killed the year before and had grown larger in death than in life. Afros were in style. The Black Panthers were a force. Public buildings, statues, monuments, even trees met the evening in their original bland colors and reemerged the next morning painted in the sparkling liberation colors of red, black, and green. Congas played at night on the streets, while teeny boppers gathered to talk of revolution. My siblings marched around the house reciting poetry from the Last Poets, a sort of rap group who recited in-your-face poetry with conga and fascinating vocal lines serving as a musical backdrop, with songs titled "Niggers Are Scared of Revolution" and "On the Subway." Every Saturday morning, my friends and I would pedal our bicycles to the corner of Dunkirk Street and Ilion Avenue to watch the local drag racers near the Sundew soft drink factory, trying to see who could drive the fastest over a dip in the road that sent even the slowest moving car airborne and landed 15 feet away, often skidding out of control, sometimes smacking against the wall of the Sundew factory before wobbling away in a pile of bent metal, grills, and fenders. Their cars had names like Smokin' Joe and Miko and Dream Machine scrawled on the hoods, but our favorite was a gleaming black souped-up GTO with the words Black Power written in smooth white script across the hood and top. He drove like a madman, and after leaving some poor Corvette in the dust, he'd power his mighty car in a circle, wheel it around, and do a victory lap for us, driving by in low speed, one muscled arm angling out the window, his car rumbling powerfully, while we whistled and cheered, raising our fists and yelling, "Black Power!" He'd laugh and burn rubber for us, tires screeching, roaring away in a burst of gleaming metal and hot exhaust, his taillights flashing as he disappeared into the back alleyways before the cops had a chance to bust him. We thought he was God. But there was a part of me that feared Black Power very obviously for the obvious reason. I thought Black Power would be the end of my mother. I had swallowed the white man's fear of the Negro, as we were called back then, whole. It began with a sober white newsman on our black and white television set introducing a news clip showing a Black Panther rally led by Bobby Seale or Huey Newton or one of those young black militant leaders, screaming to hundreds and hundreds of angry African American students, "Black Power! Black Power! Black Power!" while the crowd roared. It frightened the shit out of me. I thought to myself, these people will kill Mommy. Mommy, on the other hand, seemed unconcerned. Her motto was, if it doesn't involve you going to school or church, I could care less about it, and my answer is no, whatever it is. She insisted on absolute privacy, excellent school grades, and trusted no outsiders of either race. We were instructed never to reveal details of our home life to any figures of authority, teachers, social workers, cops, storekeepers, or even friends. If anyone asked us about our home life, we were taught to respond with, "I don't know." And for years, I did just that. Mommy's house was an entire world she created. She appointed the eldest child at home to be king or queen to run the house in her absence, and we took it from there, creating court jesters, slaves, musicians, poets, pets, and clowns. Playing in the street was discouraged and often forbidden, and if you managed to slip out, get your butt in this house before dark, she would warn, a rule she enforced to the bone. I often played that rule out to its very edge, stealing into the house at dusk just as the last glimmer of sunlight was peeking over the western horizon, closing the doors softly, hoping Mommy had gone to work, whereupon turn around and find her standing before me, hands on hips, whipping belt in hand, eyes flicking angrily back and forth to the window, then to me, lips pursed trying to decide if it was light or dark outside.
"It's still light," I'd suggest, my voice wavering, as my siblings gathered behind her to watch the impending slaughter. "That looks like light to you?" she'd snap, motioning to the window. "Looks pretty dark," my siblings would chirp from behind her. "It's definitely dark, Ma," they'd shout, stifling their giggles. If I was lucky, a baby would wail in another room, and she'd be off, hanging the belt on the doorknob as she went. "Don't do it again," she'd warn over her shoulder, and I was a free man. But even if she had any interest in Black Power, she had no time to talk about it. She worked the swing shift at Chase Manhattan Bank as a typist, leaving home at 3 p.m. and returning around 2 a.m., so she had little time for games and little time for identity crises. My seed is 1972. My parents brought a curious blend of Jewish, European, and African American distrust and paranoia into our house. On his end, my father, Andrew McBride, a Baptist minister, had his doubts about the world accepting his mixed family. He always made sure his kids never got into trouble, was concerned about money, and trusted the providence of the Holy Father to do the rest. After he died and Mommy remarried, my stepfather, Hunter Jordan, seemed to pick up where my father left off, insistent on education in church. On her end, Mommy had no model for raising us other than the experience of her own Orthodox Jewish family, which, despite the seeming flaws, an unbending nature, a stridency, a focus on money, a deep distrust of all outsiders, not to mention her father's tyranny, represented the best and worst of the immigrant mentality: hard work, no nonsense, quest for excellence, distrust of authority figures, and a deep belief in God and education. My parents were non-materialistic. They believed that money without knowledge was worthless, that education tempered with religion was the way to climb out of poverty in America, and over the years, they were proven right. Yet, conflict was a part of our lives, written into our very faces, hands, and arms, and to see how contradiction lived and survived in its essence, we had to look no farther than our own mother. Mommy's contradictions crashed and slammed against one another like bumper cars at Coney Island. White folks, she felt, were implicitly evil toward blacks, yet she forced us to go to white schools to get the best education. Blacks could be trusted more, but anything involving blacks was probably slightly substandard. She disliked people with money, yet was in constant need of it. She couldn't stand racists of either color and had great distaste for bourgeois blacks who sought to emulate rich whites by putting on airs and doing silly things like covering their couches with plastic and holding teacups with their pinkies out. "What fools," she'd hiss. She wouldn't be bothered with parents who bragged about their children's accomplishments, yet she insisted we strive for the highest professional goals. She was against welfare and never applied for it, despite our need, but championed those who availed themselves of it. She hated restaurants and would not enter one even if the meals served were free. She actually preferred to be among the poor, the working-class poor of the Red Hook housing projects in Brooklyn, the cement mixers, bakers, donut makers, grandmothers, and soul food church partisans who were her lifelong friends. It was with them that she and my father started the New Brown Memorial Baptist Church, a small storefront church which still stands in Red Hook today. Mommy loves that church, and to this day still loves Red Hook, one of the most dangerous and neglected housing projects in New York City. On any given day, she'll get up in the morning, take the New Jersey Transit train from her home in Ewing, New Jersey, to Manhattan, then take the subway to Brooklyn and wander around the projects like the Pope, the only white person in sight, waving to friends, stepping past the drug addicts, smiling at the young mothers pushing their children in baby carriages, slipping into the poorly lit hallway of 80 Dwight Street, while the young dudes in hooded sweatshirts stare balefully at the strange, bow-legged old white lady in Nikes and red sweats, who slowly hobbles up the 3 flights of dark, urine-smelling stairs on arthritic knees to visit her best friend, Mrs. Ingram, in apartment 3G. As a boy, I often found Mommy's ease among black people surprising. Most white folks I knew seemed to have a great fear of blacks. Even as a young child, I was aware of that. I'd read it in the paper, between the lines of my favorite sport columnists in the New York Post and the old Long Island Press, in their refusal to call Cassius Clay Muhammad Ali, in their portrayal of Floyd Patterson as a good Negro Catholic, and in their burning criticism of black athletes like Bob Gibson of the St. Louis Cardinals, whom I idolized. In fact, I didn't even have to open the paper to see it. I could see it in the faces of the white people who stared at me and Mommy and my siblings when we rode the subway, sometimes laughing at us, pointing, muttering things like, "Look at her with those little niggers." I remember when a white man shoved her angrily as she led a group of us onto an escalator, but Mommy simply ignored him. I remember two black women pointing at us saying, "Look at that white bitch," and a white man screaming at Mommy somewhere in Manhattan, calling her a nigger lover. Mommy ignored them all, unless the insults threatened her children, at which time she would turn and fight back like an alley cat, hissing, angry, and fearless. She had a casual way of ignoring affronts, slipping past insults to her whiteness like a seasoned boxer slips punches. When Malcolm X, the supposed demon of the white man, was killed, I asked her who he was, and she said he was a man ahead of his time. She actually liked Malcolm X. She put him in nearly the same category as her other civil rights heroes, Paul Robeson, Jackie Robinson, Eleanor Roosevelt, A. Philip Randolph, Martin Luther King Jr., and the Kennedys. Any Kennedy. When Malcolm X talked about the white devil, Mommy simply felt those references didn't apply to her. She viewed the civil rights achievements of Black Americans with pride, as if they were her own. And she herself occasionally talked about the white man in the third person, as if she had nothing to do with him. And in fact, she didn't, since most of her friends and social circle were Black women from church. "What's the matter with these white folks?" she'd muse after reading some craziness in the New York Daily News. "They're fighting over this man's money now that he's dead. None of them wanted him when he was alive, and now look at them. Forget it, Funny." This is Mommy talking to the newspaper. "Your husband is dead, okay? He's dead. Poop. You had your chance. Is money going to bring him back? No." Then she'd turn to us and deliver the invariable lecture. "You don't need money. What's money if your mind is empty? Educate your mind." Is this world crazy, or am I the crazy one? It's probably me. Indeed, it probably was. At least I thought so. I knew of no other white woman who would board the subway in Manhattan at 1 o'clock in the morning and fall asleep until she got to her stop in Queens 45 minutes later. Often I couldn't sleep until I heard her key hit the door. Her lack of fear for her safety, particularly among blacks, where she often stuck out like a sore thumb and seemed an easy target for muggers, had me stumped. As a grown man, I understand how her Christian principles and trust in God kept her going through all her life's battles, but as a boy, my faith was not that strong. Mommy took me to Harlem to visit my stepsister, Jackie, whom we called Jack, and who was my father's daughter by a previous marriage, and more like an aunt than a sister. The two of them sat in Jack's parlor and talked into the night, while Jack cooked big plates of soul food, macaroni and cheese, sweet potato pies, and biscuits for us. "Take this home to the kids, Ruth," told Ma. We put the food in shopping bags and took it on the subway without incident. But when we got off the bus in St. Albans near our house, two black men came up behind us, and one of them grabbed Mommy's purse. The shopping bag full of macaroni and cheese and sweet potato pies burst open, and food flew everywhere as Mommy held onto her purse, spinning in a crazy circle with the mugger, neither saying a word, as they both desperately wrestled for the purse, whirling from the sidewalk into the dark, empty street like two ballerinas locked in a death dance. I stood frozen in shock, watching. Finally, the mugger got the purse and ran off, as his buddy laughed at him, and Mommy fell to the ground. She got up, calmly took my hand, and began to walk home without a word. "You okay?" she asked me after a few moments. I nodded. I was so frightened I couldn't speak. All the food that Jack had cooked for us lay on the ground behind us, ruined. "Why didn't you scream?" I asked when I finally got my tongue back. "It's just a purse," she said. "Don't worry about it. Let's just get home." The incident confirmed my fears that Mommy was always in danger. Every summer, we joined the Poor Inner City Kids, the Fresh Air Fund organization sent to host families or to summer camps for free. The luckier among my siblings got to stay with host families, but I had to go to camps where they housed 10 of us in a cabin for 2 weeks at a time. Sometimes they seemed closer to prison or Job Corps than camp. Kids fought all the time. The food was horrible. I was constantly fighting. Kids called me Cochise because of my light skin and curly hair. Despite all that, I loved it. The first time I went, Mommy took me to the Roundup Point, a community center in Far Rockaway, once the home of middle-class whites and Jews like playwright Neil Simon, but long since turned black, and it seemed that the only white person for miles was my own mother. The camp organizers set up a table inside where they removed our shoes and shirts and inspected our toes for athlete's foot, checked us for measles and chickenpox, then sent us outside to board a yellow school bus for the long journey to upstate New York. As I sat on the bus, peering out the window at Mommy, the only white face in a sea of black faces, a black man walked up with his son. He had a mustache and a goatee and wore black leather pants, a black leather jacket, a ton of jewelry, and a black beret. He seemed outstandingly cool. His kid was very handsome, well-dressed, and quite refined. He placed his kid's bags in the back of the bus, and when the kid got to step on the bus, instead of hugging the child, the father offered his hand, and father and son did a magnificent, convoluted Black Power soul handshake called the DAP.
The kind of handshake that lasts 5 minutes, fingers looping, thumbs up, thumbs down, index fingers collapsing, wrists snapping, bracelets tingling. It seemed incredibly hip. The whole bus watched. Finally, the kid staggered breathlessly onto the bus and sat behind me, tapping at the window and waving at his father, who was now standing next to Mommy, waving at his kid. "Where'd you learn that handshake?" someone asked the kid. "My father taught me," he said proudly. "He's a Black Panther." The bus roared to life as I panicked. A Black Panther? Next to Mommy? It was my worst nightmare come true. I had no idea who the Panthers truly were. I had swallowed the media image of them completely. The bus clanked into gear as I got up to open my window. I wanted to warn Mommy. Suppose the Black Panther wanted to kill her. The window was stuck. I tried to move to another window. A counselor grabbed me and sat me down. I said, "I have to tell my mother something." "Write her a letter," he said. I jumped into the seat of the Black Panther's son behind me. His window was open. The counselor placed me back in my seat. "Mommy, Mommy!" I yelled at the closed window. Mommy was waving. The bus pulled away. I shouted, "Watch out for him!" But we were too far away and my window was shut. She couldn't hear me. I saw the Black Panther waving at his son. Mommy waved at me. Neither seemed to notice the other. When they were out of sight, I turned to the Black Panther's son sitting behind me and punched him square in the face with my fist. The kid held his jaw and stared at me in shock as his face melted into a knot of disbelief and tears.